Hello everybody, this video today is, as you see on the caption, it's just simply called 2 Corinthians 12, and it's roughly 2 or 3 verses. And the relevancy of this is that I heard this in church tonight, and I think back to an experience that I had in a dream. And the particular Bible verse that I'm referring to has to do with the Apostle Paul. And he had various trials and tribulations he went through during the time that he was preaching the gospel. And tonight I had never even heard that this Bible verse existed, and I decided I wanted to do this video to explain some relevance to my own experience. I want to begin, this is 2 Corinthians 12, and this is verse 1. Now this is the King James Version I'm talking about. It is not expedient for me to doubt to glory. I will come to visions and revelations of the Lord. Now here's verse 2, and this is significant. I knew a man in Christ above 14 years ago, and it says in parentheses, whether in the body I cannot tell, whether out of the body I cannot tell, God knoweth. Such and one caught up to the third heaven. Now verse 3 says, and I knew such a man, whether in the body or out of the body I cannot tell, God knoweth, how that he was caught up into paradise, and heard unspeakable words, which it is not lawful for a man to utter. And then pretty much the rest of the entire chapter doesn't even relate anymore to his foretelling or telling this story about this individual. It doesn't say what happened to this man. It doesn't say how old he was. Initially I thought it meant that the guy was supposedly 14 years old, but it says 14 years ago, which means Paul had an experience of seeing a man or meeting him, and he told him of an experience he had of what we can all assume to be either a out-of-body experience or a near-death experience. But it doesn't say what happened to him, or how this took place, whether he had an accident and he died, because Paul said in one particular Bible verse, verse 3, it says, whether in the body or out of the body, I don't know. It says only God knows whether or not he had a vision or if he had an actual spiritual experience. And the first Bible verse says this. It says, I will come to visions and revelations of the Lord. Now, in our day and time right now, I think a lot of people, and myself included, are having dreams, visions of things that I think God is impressing these things in our minds, of things that will happen in the future. And yet I'd never even known that this Bible verse or this book of the Bible relating to a story about a man who had an out-of-body experience even existed until tonight. And I feel compelled to relate this story to one that I've already posted on YouTube in the past relating to out-of-body experiences. And when I read this Bible verse, it makes me remember the fact that when Jesus died on the cross, one of the 2 other men who were also being crucified said this to Jesus, remember me when you enter paradise. Paradise means a in-between place. It's not hell, it isn't heaven. It's where everybody goes initially when they die. And I had an experience myself of a place that always just sticks out in my mind, in my soul. I feel like it was a place, it was not a dream, it was not something my mind created, of somewhere I went after starting this dream. I had an experience of crawling in a in like a crawl space under a house, and you know what that is. It's just dirt on the ground, and then you have you know, the bottom part of your flooring of your house above your head. Well, that was not the kind of place that I remember. It was like it was rock above my head, like you're in a cave. But really, it was so tight that you barely had enough maneuverability to move through this place. And every time I think about it, I feel like this must have been an out-of-body experience, because I've never had one again like that. And it's like when you remember it and when you recollect about what you experienced, for me, it just stands out. It makes me feel like this is not something that was a dream. It was a real place. And eventually going through these, like a maze of just rock and pathways, and you're going up and you're going down, kind of like the catacombs in Paris, except that you don't have the luxury to walk, you know, at height level. You had to crawl. You had to crawl through these places. And eventually I go up and I come into this office, because it had 4 corners, and it was big enough a space that you knew it was an office, because I could see different things around me of office equipment, fax machine, mostly just copy machines, and paper everywhere. But it also could have been maybe even a bomb shelter. I keep wondering about how many different things that I did see in this place, but I don't remember anything more specific than you assumed it was a storage room of some kind, because of how much paperwork was all over the place, stacked up, you know, and the copy machines imply that at one time it could have been some kind of a storage room or something, where an office building put this stuff in there after they didn't need it anymore, and they didn't want to get rid of it. But being in this room, there was no door. It was a solid room of 4 walls all around me, and that's all I can remember. I can't remember it being anything else. And I thought, how am I going to get out of here if there is no place else to go except back down into the floor where I came up? And maybe what I'm remembering in this dream is that possibly everybody who survives a nuclear war that's coming with America over Iran and over North Korea, that those who are lucky enough to survive will be in a bomb shelter someplace in a major city. There will be places where you'll be able to maybe scamper to those places if you're lucky enough to get to one before it happens. And this is a place that, you know, relates to two different places. It's not only a bomb shelter, but it's also, for me, that place called paradise between 2 worlds. Because this guy says this in, Paul said this in verse 4, how that he was caught up into paradise, and he heard unspeakable words which is not lawful for a man to utter. To me, I did not hear or remember hearing anybody speak in this room. But that doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It's just that maybe I'm not supposed to actually remember it. But getting back to what is paradise, in Psalm 23 it says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. Shadow of the valley of the shadow of death is this. Anyone who's had a near-death experience sees a dark tunnel, and there's a white light at the end. Now, that in-between dimension between earth and paradise or heaven could be a gate that takes people from this tunnel into paradise, and then you end up seeing someplace else before you eventually get to heaven. Or it could be that's where people end up going after they've been in paradise. They enter that dark black tunnel. My mother had an experience in the early 90s, late 80s, of seeing her great aunt. She had died, and the next morning she's in bed asleep, and she wakes up and she sees her aunt at the head of the foot of her bed. And her great aunt told her, "I'm in a holding place, so don't come for my funeral, or don't try to come to see me because I've already died." And paradise, the interpretation of paradise is this: those who died before Jesus actually went to the cross, they never went to heaven because Jesus had not paid for the sins of the world yet. So people who died were in paradise. In other words, they were in between because Jesus hadn't paid that ultimate sacrifice for all mankind. And that's why Jesus went there, to resurrect and to free all of those people. Because throughout Jewish history, the only thing that could actually appease God's anger and wrath for sin was what? Sacrifices. Animal sacrifices. People would burn animals on funeral piles or on things, and it was to appease God's wrath against them. But that did not save them, because it was only sort of like a substitution for what Jesus would do on the cross. And now I would say this, that when Jesus was resurrected after he died, he had already freed all those people out of paradise, because he probably asked each one of them individually, "Do you accept and believe what I did on the cross?" And for those who accepted, he brought them out of paradise into heaven. And paradise is some place that still exists to this day. It's still there. It's a holding place for people who are transcending between heaven or earth and heaven, who are saved, because my great aunt was there and she told my mother that herself. And when I read this Bible verse, it just clicked in my mind. I had to make a video about this subject because I never knew it was there in the Bible until tonight. And it just says, "I knew a man in Christ above 14 years ago," and it says, "whether in the body I cannot tell, whether out of the body I cannot tell, God knows." That means that this person he met and who gave and conveyed this story, the man survived either a near-death experience or he had an out-of-body experience. And he said he went to a third heaven. Very significant, because in the same sentence Paul said this. He said, also known, or actually he was caught up into paradise. Now, if third heaven is mentioned in the Bible, it means that this is the in-between place of heaven and earth. It's paradise, because it isn't heaven, but it's where people go initially after they die. And for those people who have had these kinds of experiences, and I'm one of them, I think that triggers something in your subconscious mind. It triggers something maybe even in your soul itself to say, I've been there. And that's why I'm making this video today. I'm saying I was there. That's that place I went, even though it doesn't relate to what most people probably think of paradise being. It is an in-between. It is a place where it's not heaven, but it's not earth either. It's somewhere in between that two times, or those two places. And when I read the Bible verse, it just, for me, it's like I had to put this on film. I had to say something to people about what it is that is paradise. It isn't heaven, but it's an in-between those two places, here in our physical world, and those who have died and gone into the spiritual realm. Thank you.